Okay. So again, the trial represents how many times you're performing the experiment. So flipping a coin 10 times, that's 10 trials. An outcome, that's the result to an experiment. So a coin has how many outcomes? 2. Has 2 outcomes. Has tails and heads. Those are the 2 outcomes that a coin has. An event is the specific outcome that you're trying to achieve. So if I say I'm going to roll a die, and I want the probability of the number 3, of landing on a 3 is my specific outcome that I'm looking for. So if I don't land on a 3, I didn't achieve my goal. I didn't achieve my event. And then the idea of probability itself is just that measurement of how likely or unlikely is your event going to occur. So again, when I said rolling the 7, that's an impossible event because it'll never happen. Rolling a number that is 6 or less is a certain event because it will always happen. So there's different things that you can measure, and that's what this number line is here. This is our probability number line. And it's really important for you to understand that probability ranges from 0 to 1 whole or 0 to 100%. So the way that we measure probability is either by a fraction, a decimal, or a percent. And your fractions are your more common ways of being able to identify probability. Setting it up as a fraction is the most common way that we write them. The next common way would be percents. The least common way would be a decimal. Stop talking in the front row, please. So again, your probability is going to range from 0 to 1 whole, or 0% to 100%. From 0 to 1 or 0% to 100%. That's the ranging of probability. Now, as I stated before, we always start at 0. The term 0 is an impossible event. It means it will not happen. It can never happen no matter how many times you perform your experiment. It will never occur. That's the probability of 0. All the way on the very opposite end of that spectrum is always happening. That's called certain. It happens 1 out of 1 time, or 100% of the time. The probability is 1 whole or 100%. And then right in the center of it all is what we deem equally likely or as likely as not, and that's smack dab at half, 1/2, or 0.5 or 50%. So like the coin, flipping a coin, tails is an equally likely event because it happens half of the time. Now, in between these, you have other terms of probability. So any probability that is greater than 0 but less than 1/2. So it's greater than 0% but less than 50%. That's called unlikely. Now, they give you an example of 1/4 or 25%. That's not the only thing for unlikely. It could be 33%. It could be 1/50th. It could be 49.8%. Those are all ranging between 0 and 50, or 0 and 1/2. That would be an unlikely event. And then on the other end, you've got what's deemed likely. That's any value that's greater than half but less than 1 whole, or greater than 50% but less than 100%. That's deemed likely. Their example is 3/4 or 75%. But again, it could be, 92.7%. That's deemed likely, very likely. Or it could be, we'll say 4/6. That's also deemed likely. 3/5. That's deemed likely. Okay, anything greater than 50% or greater than 1/2. All right, let's scroll down to the next part of our number line, or the next slide on this page. So determining whether something's considered to be impossible, unlikely, equally likely, likely, or certain, we first have to understand what the probability is before we can go ahead and deem it being one of these terms. So rolling an even number on a number cube, an even number on the number cube. So that's the event that I'm looking for. Remember, we talked about event is your specific outcome. So in this case, the event that I'm looking for is an even number. Who can raise their hand and tell me what are my even numbers on a number cube? So on a die, if I roll this die, what are all the even numbers that it could land on? Trevor. 2, 4, and 6. Those are numbers, not values. The number 2, the number 4, and the number 6. How many numbers is that? 3. There are 3 ways that I can land on an even number. If I land on a 2, I win. A 4, I win. A 6, I win. There's 3 different numbers I can land on to be able to have my event be true. Now, probability is always your specific event out of a total. So when we talk about the total, we'll talk about all the possible outcomes. What are all the possible numbers I could land on a number cube? Kingston. Can you land on 0? No. Very good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many numbers is that? 6 numbers. So out of 6 total numbers that are on this number cube, there's 3 ways that I can get an even number. As always, whenever you're given a fraction, you immediately should be looking to see if you can simplify it. Can we simplify this fraction? What does it simplify to? 1/2. What likelihood up here, impossible, unlikely, equally likely, likely, or certain, is represented by 1/2? Say it louder. Equally likely. If we look back up at our number line, 1/2 is located right here at equally likely. So the probability of getting an even number is an equally likely chance. All right, what about the probability of rolling a 5 on the number cube? So now, focusing on the event, the specific event I'm looking for is rolling a number 5. How many 5s are on a number cube? 1. There's only 1 5 on the number cube. And again, we already found the total. How many total numbers? 6. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are all the total numbers on the number cube. Can we simplify 1 6? No. 1 6 is just going to be 1 6. What kind of likelihood is 1 6? Joel?
Evelyn, Marin Romero for checkout.
She's on her way.
Thank you.
Joel? Unlikely. 1 6. That is less than 1/2, but it's more than 0. Less than 1/2, but more than 0. So this is an unlikely event. All right, problem C. Problem C. We want to pick a month that has 28 days in it. 28 days. How many months have 28 days? Nope.
Oh, every month. 12.
Every month has 28 days in it, doesn't it? There is a January 28th. There is a February 28th. There is a March 28th. Now, if it said picking a month that has only 28 days in it, that's when you would go with just February. But in this case, so we're looking for ones that have 28 days. All the months have 28 days in it. So how many months is that? 12 months. Out of how many total months? 12 months, right? So what's 12 over 12? 1 whole, and that's what kind of probability? Certain. All right, the probability of rolling a 10 on a number cube. So the event that we're looking for, we're looking to get the number 10. How many 10s exist on that die? 0. There is no 10. That's just a 0. Out of how many total numbers on the number cube? 6. So it's 0 out of 6, which is what? Impossible. 0 over 6 is just going to be 0. So that is an impossible event. Any questions? Pretty simple. Hence the reason it's called simple events. Basics. All right, let's go ahead and go on to page 20 then. I'm trying to get this done as quickly as we can because I want to have enough time for you guys to do your assignment in class. The assignment that you're going to get after notes are done. Not right now. I'm good. All right, let's go on to page 20. All right, on page 20, a complement. When we talk about complements for probability, we're talking about the event not happening. So a complement is basically the not probability. So probability that it's going to rain versus the probability that it's not going to rain. So if there's a 40% chance of rain, what's the complement? Listen one more time. The complement is the probability that that event will not happen. So if it's a 40% chance of rain today, what's the complement to that? 60%. A 60% chance that it will not rain. That would be the complement. So taking a look up here, a bag of marbles contains 6 red, 6 blue, 3 green, and 1 yellow. The probability that red is going to happen is 3/8. They've already found the probability for you. So they want the probability that it will not land on red. So if I know that the probability of red is 3 out of 8, what's the probability that it's not red? 5 out of 8. It's just that opposite. All you're doing is taking it away from 1 whole. So you're just taking 1 whole and subtracting the probability that it did happen. 1 whole minus 3/8, and that gives you 5/8. Go ahead and do B and C on your own. They're giving you the probability that something will happen. You're converting and changing it around to it not happening. So it's kind of like you're either going to pass or you're going to fail. Okay, so if the probability of rolling a 5 or a 6 is 1/3, what's the probability that you're not going to roll a 5 or a 6? Kingston, 2/3, right? 1/3 of the time it happens, that means the other 2/3 of the time it does not happen. All you're doing is taking 1 whole and subtracting that 1/3, and you're going to get 2/3. Probability of picking a queen out of a deck of cards is 1/13. Serious? What's the probability that we will not pick a queen? 12 out of 13. So again, you're taking that 1 whole that probability is always out of, subtract the probability that it does happen, and you're left with a probability that it does not happen, the complement. Again, very quick and simple stuff. Yes. Yeah, basically your denominator is your whole, because right, 1 whole, 2 out of 2 is 1 whole, 3 out of 3 is a whole, 8 out of 8 would be a whole. So 8 out of 8 minus 3 out of 8 would give you 5 out of 8. 3 out of 3 minus 1/3 would give you 2/3. 13 out of 13 minus 1 out of 13 would give you 12 out of 13. Subtracting the denominator and the numerator to give you a new numerator. The denominator stays the same. The denominator is the whole. All right, last part. Eric's teacher almost always gives a quiz the day after a lesson that students didn't ask many questions. Should he expect a quiz on Monday if no one asked any questions on Friday? Why yes? Not equally likely. You're right, it is a yes. Yeah, so here's the term that you should be focusing on. The teacher almost always is another way of saying it's likely to happen. Almost always means it's likely. She almost always gives a quiz if people don't ask questions. Well, people didn't ask questions. So it's a good chance that, yeah, she's going to give a quiz. Is it 100% going to happen? No, because it just says almost always. If it said always gives a test or a quiz, then yeah, that would be a certain event. But this says almost always, so it makes it likely. What about for problem B? Todd rarely watches TV for longer than 30 minutes in the afternoon. If he started watching TV at 4 p.m., how likely is it that he'll still be watching at 5 p.m.? Kingston. Unlikely. What term relates back to unlikely? He rarely watches TV. The term rarely means unlikely. It's an unlikely event that he would still be watching TV an hour after he started when he rarely watches past 30 minutes. So this is unlikely. All right, your assignment, I'm going to pass it out to you. It's going to go on page 21. It's only front page, so it can be glued in on page 21 of your notebook. Has to be glued in onto page 21.
Page 21.